Welcome to the Fantasy Football Forge Week 15 Waiver Wire Show. My name is Steve, and just a quick heads up right off the bat here. I am recording this prior to the Arizona versus New England game, the Monday Night Football game. So if anything major were to be changed due to something in this game as far as the waivers go, I will, of course, come and update that in the comments. So check down in the comments for anything, especially if there was any injuries. And also, before we get to the waiver wire and before we cover some news and notes from today, Monday, I would just like to remind you that you can get all of my rankings up on the website, www.theffforge.com. There is a link down in the description to that, as well as a link to a Patreon page where you can help to support the channel. That would be very much appreciated. Haven't said that in a while, so I just want to get that out there. I think it's time we get down to business, starting off with Deebo Samuel, who did twist his ankle in the game yesterday. I somehow missed that in my recap show. Deebo's probably going to be done for the season, and his backup, Danny Gray, will make it into my waiver wire for the wide receiver position, so we'll maybe cover it a little bit more down there. Let's keep going here with Jeff Wilson, who does have a hip injury, and there was an update on that. I know that. He is day-to-day with that injury. Apparently they avoided anything serious. As far as Tyler Boyd goes, he could miss up to 2 weeks here, it looks like, with his dislocated finger. Then Brock Purdy is receiving an MRI today on his oblique injury. He did play through that for almost the entire game. Apparently it happened on the second drive, and most likely that MRI is just a precautionary measure. The expectations are that he will be ready to go this weekend. Then Matt Ryan is going to continue to be the starter for Indianapolis. That has become official, and Carson Wentz was activated from the IR, and it was made known that Taylor Heineke will continue to be the starter once Carson Wentz came back up, so that would be the expectation. Amari Cooper remains day-to-day with his hip injury. He did play through that this previous weekend. He was on the field quite a bit for it, maybe a little bit more than I expected, actually, both based on his production and based on the expectation pre-game for him being limited. I think he was on the field 84% of snaps, something like that. Unless that flares up throughout the week, you should still be on the field quite a bit next weekend. Another quarterback situation here. Andy Dalton has going to continue to be the starter for New Orleans after their bye. DJ Moore is day-to-day with a knee sprain, so we'll keep an eye on that. Apparently that happened quite late in the game. I wasn't even aware of it yesterday. And Dontrell Hilliard has already been declared out this coming weekend, so he will not to be of any use as a stash if you wanted to get rid of him to get a higher quality stash in the short term. I think that would be worth it. Then Daniel Bellinger is pretty sore today, and the team will be monitoring that. So I forget what his specific injury was, but to me that seems like good news that it's just really being described as soreness as of now. And Mike White is day-to-day with his rib injury, and the team is prepping this week already with the expectation that he will be playing this weekend, so no major concerns there. Khalil Herbert may be getting off of the IR next week, so keep that in mind. And, you could always see if he's available on your waivers as a similar type stash to Dontrell Hilliard, probably with a little bit more inherent value as far as the ability to start him in a pinch, even when the starter is playing. Then Lovie Smith is unsure if Dameon Pierce's ankle injury will affect his status this Sunday, so not really any new information on that, which is better than not news, I suppose. Then on to Hayden Hurst, and he is week to week yet, so don't really expect him this week, and so definitely droppable. Marcus Mariota is expected to be placed on the IR. We've already gone through the fact that he will not be the starting quarterback for them, and maybe this had something to do with that decision. I don't know, but I think it was a knee injury or a knee issue that they're expecting to put him on IR for. Then T.Y. Hilton just signed with the Cowboys not too long ago, so expectations are that he might even be able to play this coming up weekend. I would not be going after T.Y. Hilton on the waiver wire. He did not look too great the last time that he was out there on the field, and it's been a little while now, so it'd be such a long shot to actually play him and also have him produce that I just wouldn't want to mess with that, and I don't really think that impacts anybody else except for maybe a little bit the emergence of the old Pittsburgh wide receiver that they have there. I can't think of his name right now. It just came back last weekend. Didn't really do anything. Now let's move on to a release player. Running back Damian Williams was released by Atlanta, and he is supposed to be at 100% and ready to go if any team would like to spin their wheels on him. So there weren't really any major running back injuries, unless like Kenneth Walker's is worse than we expect. But as you can see right here, he's actually day to day. So hopefully that's not the case. Seattle has strung us along in the past, so you never know. But I can't picture, I don't know what situation he becomes useful in as of right now with the running back picture as it is in the league. Then Adam Thielen is dealing with a knee bruise. He has apparently been dealing with that all season long. It's been more of a nuisance than anything, but he did re-aggravate the issue, made it worse this past week. And so that is just something to keep in mind. Maybe a tiebreaker for you next weekend if you're looking at him and somebody else. That's about it. Doesn't seem to be much of an issue, but it was enough of an issue that we know about it now. Then Jeff Wilson is day to day, so did we cover that already? It looks good there, averted injury, and then Saints signed running back David Johnson just even more recently than some of these other signings and releasings. So a lot of movement going around as teams, I guess, are preparing for either next year or the playoffs and closing books, and maybe some will start some new ones somewhere. So a couple of interesting signings. Now, as far as bye weeks go, we are all done with them. Goodbye, bye weeks. Everybody's playing. I just named these because I'm weird like that, and just to keep them separate. So we're going to go to Strategy Hall real quick, and just my style of playing at this point in the season is it's week-to-week survival now in the playoffs. So everybody is droppable and everybody is pick-upable. Every strategy is viable. You can block your opponent. You could drop someone of value that you're not going to use to take some sort of crazy high-end stash if you wanted. Do whatever you wish. Win by all means. There's pluses and minuses to any strategy. So when I say everybody is droppable, obviously within reason, but if you don't think that person being out there on the waiver wire could potentially hurt you if somebody else started them, or if there's at least a high chance that they wouldn't hurt you, and you want to pack up a defense that has a good matchup next week with whatever defense you're using this week, now is the time to start doing something like that. If you haven't already, it's okay to just start playing week to week really here. Now on to Conspiracy Corner, and my conspiracy brain says that the NFL might be laxing on some of the concussion protocols here as we go and approach the playoffs. Maybe they could get us used to players starting to come back the same week, because I really don't think that the NFL wants to be watering down their product by having a quarterback who every other year probably, and I say quarterback because that's the most notable position for the NFL, would miss a game in the playoffs due to a concussion where they probably could have played, but out of, I think, proper precaution, it is not been playing this season. So right now would be the time for the league to start to loosen up on that a little bit and just get us used to things. It wouldn't be the first time that rules lax. Like in the beginning of every season, there are certain things that the referees call every single play. And by the time we get to the playoffs, they're usually a lot more relaxed on some of those penalties that they were otherwise calling all season long. We'll see if that happens, but that's just a little optimism in regards to some of these quarterbacks this week that have concussion injuries. There's a lot of them. So we'll see if one or two of them don't come back or not. Now, as far as the quarterback waiver wire goes, I have Jared Goff in at number 1, but I'm almost always with my waiver wire options. I'm not looking immediately only at this week. I'm weighing the long term and the short term. And so Jared Goff's really obviously for the next 2 weeks versus Carolina and Chicago. I would not be opposed to playing him against the Jets if you needed to, but it just goes back to that whole strategy thing. Right now, feel free to carry 2 quarterbacks, 2 defenses, 2 tight ends, whatever the case, things that I normally would advocate against. Then Mike White is going up against, obviously, Detroit, Jacksonville, and Seattle in the next 3 matchups. That's a pretty darn juicy matchup. Detroit has been better defensively as of late, but more so on the ground than in the air, and that has impacted teams, and I actually think that that's a pretty bad matchup for the New York Jets overall. except they're not afraid to dink and dunk their way down the field, so should be able to work around that a little bit. Then in the third spot here, I have Brock Purdy going up against Seattle, Washington, and Las Vegas. Also a very good setup there. And all three of these guys, I think, are very much guys that should be on rosters, should be over 50% owned. Then all of these quarterbacks are Jags, essentially, that have good schedules, have some use to them. So Ryan Tannehill, just only this coming up week, is an option. Just like last week, he was an option. He came through with that just fine to expectations. Then Kenny Pickett, unfortunately, has a concussion, so he may not be available for this game against Carolina, but does follow up with Las Vegas and Baltimore. Baltimore, I still don't know if they're a good matchup or not necessarily. And with that, let me just make clear too, these are pretty much guys who you probably don't need to be taking off of the waiver wire over waiver wire as the waiver wires run. You don't need to spend a spot on them. Let them become free agents, and then you can take them for the most part. But Mac Jones is actually a guy, if you were to be optimistic about him, I'm not necessarily as far as the upside goes, but he could finish the year out with that type of floor that a Brock Purdy or the Jimmy Garoppolo has provided. He could finish out the year with 3 games where it's 17 to 22 fantasy points. Wouldn't be a shock. Really good lineup there for some upside. Then Andy Dalton's on here. Baker Mayfield would be a big risk, but if you're a believer, not the worst schedule. Green Bay and Los Angeles Chargers, but not so good in week 2 there, going up against Denver. Of course, all the injuries, their defense has been declining a little bit as of recent. Matt Ryan has a couple of good matchups here in the short term, so some big upside to those if you need it. And Tyler Huntley, concussion again here, so we'll see if he comes back, but also a pretty nice setup, all 3 of the games there. And then Jordan Love, if Aaron Rodgers were to sit, this is one of the sweeter matchups here, these next 3 games. Maybe it'll be the next 2 after that. So if you wanted to get crazy and you believe in Jordan Love, which actually I kind of do, then hey, so he's a big stretch. But here are 3 names who I think will be out there on some people's lists, on some people's radars, who I really don't like due mostly to their schedules. So Russell Wilson has a concussion himself as well, may miss the next game, and then I would love to trust him after 1 game, but I don't even think I looked at his schedule. More so for me, as Russell Wilson has been dog crap for 13 of 14 weeks this season. Then Desmond Ridder, we don't know what that is, so I really don't want to take a risk on that. At least Jordan Love has had some time in the league, and we've seen that he's come a long ways over the last season as far as we can tell. So they're on similar, you're totally going out on a limb with those 2, but I would much rather go out on the Jordan Love limb compared to Desmond Ridder's, also because of schedule. And Taylor Heineke does not have a very nice schedule over the next 3 weeks, so I don't care to mess with that. Now let's move on to the running back waiver options, and I have, I think, 3 tiers. That's wide receivers. I got 4. So starting off with the first tier, it's really not a good week for running backs. Jerick McKinnon I have at the top of the tier. It's something that I just told you guys not to trust too much in the recap, but obviously we've seen what can come of being on that offense and being on the field for that offense. So he's your safe floor-ish kind of option. And that's pretty much all these guys give you. It's not a whole heck of a lot of a ceiling, even though, and that's why Jerick McKinnon is at the top, because we just saw that ceiling last week. But then Travis Homer does have the highest combination of floor and ceiling. If he were to be the starter this week, Kenneth Walker may be coming back, in which case, obviously, he'd be useless. But if you wanted to hold on to him or whatnot, he was on the field for nearly 90% of the snaps, and you can't overlook that despite his poor performance. And obviously, if he didn't have such a poor performance, he'd be a really high pickup. He'd probably be on a tier of his own this week, but it was not the case. Tyler Algier gets 50% of the work there ish, 40 to 55 most weeks, and so there's some use with the amount of usage that he gets. Then we go on to the Houston running backs, and frankly, I suspect it would be Rex Burkhead. It could be Dario Gumbawale just based on performance. I think he's looked better than Rex Burkhead in opportunities. I don't know if he does everything better that coaches want, though. And then Eno Benjamin's a new addition who I believe got the most work out of the 3 as far as the number of carries and or catches or combination. of those things in the previous week. So who is it going to be? I don't know. That's if Dameon Pierce goes down. So you're already taking a big risk because we have somewhat goodish news on Dameon Pierce following his injury this last week. And I just wouldn't want to mess with it. But one of them, if Dameon Pierce is out, is going to get a good number of opportunities. And so can't overlook that if you want to take some sort of swing at a bad fence. So I couldn't not include them because then we have Gus Edwards, Chuba Hubbard, and Jordan Mason all down here as the second running backs on their teams in the order somewhat of, hopefully, their value. I shouldn't say somewhat, but I had a tough time splitting the three of them apart and choosing which order to put them in. I originally had Jordan Mason actually at the top of this group, and Chuba just came off of a big week. Now, this is a tier of backups if you would like to take a shot at getting yourself a absolute league winner for one of the following last two games of the season, and Joshua Kelly's definitely right up at the top of this list. Zamir White was, it appears at least that we got our suspicions verified for a short while recently when Josh Jacobs went off the field, and it was Zamir White who seemed to come in for his role for like a play, so no guarantee. Yeah, these other guys are all great backups as well. Now on to the wide receivers, and just give a quick check on your waiver, in your free agents with your waiver wire or whatever, for Rondale Moore and Treylon Burks. They both were dropped a fair bit this previous week, so it is potential that they slipped on there and you might not have caught it and they're hiding because maybe they won't have any kind of projection for next week yet. So two guys with a lot of more upside than pretty much anybody on the waivers, but the wide receiver waivers aren't so bad. They're pretty good. Wide receivers always deep, but we do have DPJ, DJ Shark here right up at the top, followed by Jamison Williams as a total upside shot. I pretty much predicted his usage this coming up week, which was like 3 times the amount of usage he had the previous week. Next, I'm going to probably double that, so that'll put him up to like 30% usage for the first playoff game. I think there's a ceiling of like 70-80% of usage by the time we get to the championship game, and that's probably being optimistic. So he is risky in multiple ways, but as we saw with his one catch so far in his career, he could be explosive and dangerous and get behind defenses for those big pop plays and give you some of those games that can win you the week all on their own, essentially, like Mike Williams. Then Kadarius Toney is potentially going to be coming back. It looks like he was almost going to be coming back this past week, so I'm pretty much expecting him to be back. I don't know about full usage this week, but we did see in a short period of time some very nice upside from Kadarius Toney. I'm not going to downgrade Darius Slayton too much in my rankings compared to where I had him last week because he had a bad week and a week that I expected him to have a bad week. So it is what it is. Then Elijah Moore is going to creep on up here from like way at the bottom of my list due to Corey Davis's concussion. Obviously, if he were to come back, then Elijah Moore goes down. But if not, there is some pretty nice upside. Elijah Moore is a highly talented guy who just seems to be the fifth option on the team when Corey Davis is there. But otherwise, he's kind of the second, third, and maybe most explosive big play guy that they have. Then Matt Collins, he's just a bottomed out floor and a really high ceiling kind of guy if you want to go for it. In a situation where we've seen him come through a few times. And Corey Davis, we'll see if he comes back from his concussion or not. If he does, he's right up here, or you could hold on to him for a week because he has a good connection with Mike White. Then let's move on to Alec Pierce, Devontae Parker, Danny Gray, Jahan Dotson, Isaiah McKenzie, Julio Jones, Tutu Atwell, Paris Campbell, Nico Collins. Just my B-plus tier here, tier 2. Some good options, a little bit of upside here with Alec Pierce, Devontae Parker, if there continues to be an injury with Jacoby Myers. And then let's just end this little descriptions here with Danny Gray, who was drafted as the Deebo Samuel replacement eventually. That's really what he is. And so it looks like he'll probably get that opportunity. So if you wanted to take a chance on a guy, Danny Gray might be one of your best options to take a chance on. He'll probably be on the field more than Jameson Williams, put it like that. So there is an opportunity there that we might be generally overlooking with the Deebo Samuel injury. Then this brings us to my C grade tier, guys who you could play who have performed fairly well for one reason or another as of late, most of them. And that starts with Ben Skowronek, Demarcus Robinson, Terrace Marshall Jr. Actually, I have on here mostly because if DJ Moore were to be injured, I would think that his value goes up by a little ways, being the most dangerous receiver that they'll have in that event. So this hinges upon the DJ Moore injury, otherwise he's down here. Then Isaiah Hodgins had a connection with Daniel Jones, and I think for 3 straight weeks he's gotten targets in the end zone. 2 of them he caught. 1 of them I think he caught but was called back by holding 3 weeks ago. So with 6 targets this previous week, I'm, if you were desperate and if it's a decent matchup, he's been catching on pretty well there. And he's actually a guy who I didn't mind coming out of college. I thought he had some upside skills sets with him. So yeah, we'll see if that continues or not, but right now he's a name that nobody's really talking about that's done some stuff recently. Then Van Jefferson, Jarvis Landry, and Chris Moore are all decent options. Chris Moore could be higher up on the list. I'm pretty much expecting Nico Collins, who was injured this previous weekend, to maybe be healthy enough and come back, and or Brandon Cooks, one of them at least, which would take some of the edge off of Chris Moore, but he did have a really good week. So he's not somebody who it would be the worst case to take a chance on with the waiver wire. Pick him up and you could drop him later this week if Nico and or Brandon Cooks, especially if both of them were to return. Then we have my bottom tier here. You can just see that right there, right on your own. I don't need to read them off. Let's move on to the tight ends. And before you do anything, go check your waiver wire. See if Dallas Goedert, Darren Waller, or Cole Kmet aren't all available, any of them, because they would be some really good options and be, I would say, top of the waiver wire. Obviously, Dallas Goedert would be a smash landing if that were to be something that you saw. Now, on to my tight ends, and in this first tier, I have Evan Ingram, Tyler Conklin, Chigozie Okonkwo, and Daniel Bellinger, just kind of hanging on to the bottom of the tier. He is injured, Daniel Bellinger. We went over that in the news and notes. It does sound like he's just really sore, and so he's, we'll just say day to day is what it sounds like for him coming back this weekend. I do think that he's performed well enough this season when we've seen him to warrant hanging on to this tier, but it's really these 3 who are the big 3 right now. Conklin had, I think, another 8 targets this past weekend, so that's always good. We just talked about how they might have to dink and dunk a lot too in this coming matchup, so that'd be good. Evan Ingram's not really in a great matchup, and I kind of wanted to move him down for it, but it is against Dallas, and they have been less of a tough matchup as of very recent, and so I in a game that I think could be a higher scoring game, I like players in those games, so I'm not knocking Evan Ingram too much due to a tough tight end matchup. They're tough to tell anyways. Then Chigozie Okonkwo just had himself a monster week, and he is definitely somebody, if he's out there, you probably should grab, because if Treylon Burks is out, Treylon makes him way more valuable than if Treylon's in. So he's very dependent, and that's why he's not at the top of this list. I am expecting Treylon Burks to return this week, but it's no guarantee. Apparently, I never saw the injury, but apparently his concussion was pretty nasty, so maybe it'll be a more than 1 weeker, but most of them tend to come back in 1 week. So that's how they go, and I don't think we really need to talk, or if you have any questions on any of these guys, if you're digging into this pile for the tight end position and you have questions, just drop them in the comments. You can drop comments are always appreciated on YouTube videos. But yeah, just feel free to ask if you have any or any should I pick up this guy? Should I drop this guy? If you want a second, somebody else's 2 cents, I'm here for that. So I will keep my eyes out for any questions in the comments. And that is it for the Week 15 waiver wire. Thank you so much for coming on through. I'm sorry, I'm looking for how long I've recorded. Oh, it's a long one. All right, peace out.